But let's start with the first of two big stories that developed last night. The president of Columbia University, Minouche Shafik, resigned from office just last night. My friend Eliana Johnson over at the Washington Free Beacon broke that story last night after Shafik emailed members of the Columbia community to say, quote, "I write with sadness to tell you that I am stepping down as president of Columbia University effective August 14th, 2024. So obviously August 14th was yesterday. She notified them basically of an immediate resignation. Now, Shafik did not pretend her resignation was unrelated to campus protests surrounding Gaza. I thought that was interesting because sometimes you see people speak in very vague terms about why they're leaving a position. That's not what happened. In her email, she described recent months as, quote, "a period of turmoil where it has been difficult to overcome divergent views across our community." Here's more from that email. "This period," she wrote, "has taken a considerable toll on my family as it has for others in our community. Over the summer, I have been able to reflect and have decided that my moving on at this point would best enable Columbia to traverse the challenges ahead. I am making this announcement now so that leadership can be in place before the new term begins." Now, I checked yesterday. Columbia goes back to school later than some other colleges. They're back in early September. I feel like at other schools you'd be scrambling because it would happen like right now as students are going back to campus. Now, Shafik lasted for 13 months. 13 months. She succeeded a president that was at Columbia University for years, so it was kind of a big deal that Columbia had handed power off to Shafik. They also liked that Shafik had international experience that came from places like the World Bank and the IMF, and that was seen as a positive thing in terms of Shafik's ability to navigate international challenges and conflicts and all of that. Think about this. All three presidents who were grilled in that anti-Semitism on campus hearing in the House of Representatives after October 7th, specifically, memorably by Elise Stefanik, have now left their jobs. That includes Claudine Gay, who was also absolutely lauded as this splashy new president of Harvard who was going to make a big difference and was suddenly, after some number of months, she didn't even last a year, she was gone from the position over all of this. It's also worth remembering at Columbia, they did happen to have, I shouldn't say happen because that makes it sound like it's nobody's fault. The incidents at Columbia, as much as I believe the American right overstated some of the anti-Semitism in a really helpful way, broadly expanding that definition in the same way that the left has done with other definitions, bigotry, sexism, et cetera, to simply include people who are anti-Zionist. I understand some people intentionally conflate those two to get away with anti-Semitism, but at Columbia, all that said, at Columbia, there was some pretty serious stuff happening. There was one student who a lot of people will remember said, quote, "Zionists don't deserve to live." Their future with the university is uncertain as of recent reporting. People may remember there was a video of one person on campus holding a sign. This is back when the protests erupted in the spring that said, "Al-Qassam's next target." These are obvious, serious acts of anti-Semitism, but the left was also really unhappy with Shafik. So in the same way the right said, "You're not doing enough," the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, last night took a victory lap when Shafik resigned, because Mike Johnson, people probably remember, went to Columbia when all of this erupted in the spring. The Speaker of the House got involved in the Columbia University president controversy. I mean, that's how high up this went. And he took a victory lap last night. So the right had always been saying Shafik did not do enough. The left called what Shafik orchestrated, quote, "a crackdown" on the students. Now, when I talked to students last spring, they said a lot of those incidents of legitimate anti-Semitism, I talked to one student, actually a Jewish organizer of the protest who was camping in a tent on the quad at Columbia University. They claim that the woman who was holding that Al-Qassam's next target sign was not actually a Columbia University student. And there were some incidents where you had outside agitators coming in to various different campuses, Columbia included, and their acts being lumped in with acts of students. But clearly, as the president of the university, someone in charge of the physical campus space, Jewish students at Columbia University had some reason to be disturbed by what they were seeing. Now, the crackdown allegations that Shafik, got all these students off the quad and, called the NYPD, that's where the left was also really unhappy. This is of pro-Palestine demonstrators celebrating the resignation of Shafik as well. So Axios reports this resignation comes after 3 other Columbia administrators resigned earlier this month for engaging in text messages that, quote, touched on ancient anti-Semitic tropes, as Shafik herself had previously put it. This entire news cycle, I think we should absolutely expect to start once again as students are actually back at campus in the fall, which is happening in some schools that go back earlier right now. It's not going anywhere. So the Shafiks of the world, the Claudine Gays of the world, they need to be prepared because this is a presidential election cycle, obviously an extremely contentious presidential election cycle. And there's basically nobody in academia outside of maybe the University of Chicago and great schools like Hillsdale that are prepared, that have the ability. I actually thought Ben Sass did a pretty good job down in Florida of saying there's plenty of room for disagreement, just don't break the university's rules. And that was always my thought about what the left called a quote, crackdown at Columbia University. I mean, I see what the right was doing as, in some cases, wildly overstating and conflating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in a way that was politically correct and not helpful to the free exchange and free flow of ideas. It's not helpful to smear decent people like the Jewish student that I talked to last spring who organized the protest, was one of the organizers of the protest, had Seder in her tent on the quad. I don't think it's helpful to smear her as an anti-Semite or somebody complicit in anti-Semitism. She should be able to express her opinions about Israel as a Jew, even if that's something that is considered really dangerous by others who are big supporters of Israel, in the same way that those supporters of Israel should be able to do what they do without being called genocidal maniacs. This seems so basic and so obvious, and the debate is fun and fascinating over political correctness on college campuses, and it has been for years. But nobody in this media environment is prepared to really have that conversation and is prepared to really lead a university in a way that, I'm going to use the word again, projects leadership and says this is what young kids deserve. This is what it means to learn on an American campus. There's none of it. There's none of it. So, I mean, again, I would point to Ben Sass. I think the University of Chicago has done a good job. But these are Ivy League universities. They were the jewel of global academics, and they cannot make it through these news cycles. The presidents can't make it through these news cycles with projecting a sense of strength and confidence. Maybe that's what's lacking. It's moral clarity. The moral clarity is that you're allowed to say awful things and have a debate. And in fact, we're all better for allowing people with awful ideas to have that debate. It's really not that hard. It wasn't that hard in this country for a really long time. It wasn't that hard in the West for a really long time, but apparently it is now. I think moral clarity is what, when I talk to students in college, it's the one thing that they feel like they're missing. So let's find some maybe Ivy League presidents with moral clarity. All right, if you liked this clip, make sure to subscribe to the channel, the Undercurrents channel, that is. And for premium content, go over to undercurrents.tv. Feel free to leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts as well. It helps a lot.